We throw around words like liberty, equality, and human rights all the time. We kind of take them for granted. But these ideas have a history, a really dramatic one, and a huge part of it was forged in the fire and blood of the French Revolution. This was a moment that didn't just get rid of a king. It completely rewrote the rulebook on power and politics for, well, pretty much the whole world. So let's dive into how it all went down. Our story starts in Paris. The date is July 14th, 1789. And let me tell you, the city is an absolute powder keg. Rumors are just flying everywhere. People are saying the king's sending troops to crush the city, that he's going to massacre his own citizens. Fear and anger are literally boiling over in the streets. So, driven by this panic and a desperate need for weapons to defend themselves, thousands of people march on the Bastille. Now, this wasn't just some random prison. It was this huge, terrifying fortress that stood as a symbol of the king's unchecked power. In the chaos that follows, the crowd storms the gates, the commander is killed, and the few prisoners inside are set free. The people then start tearing the whole thing down, brick by painful brick. This one incredibly violent act became the spark that lit the revolution on fire. But why? I mean, how did it get to this point? What could possibly drive ordinary people to do something so extreme? Well, to really get it, we have to rewind and look at the pressure that had been building up for decades. Welcome to what historians call the Old Regime, basically the way French society was set up before 1789. And to put it bluntly, it was a fundamentally broken system, a kingdom totally divided against itself. Okay, so French society was split into three main groups, or estates. At the very top, you had the clergy and the nobility. Now get this, together they were only about 3% of the population, but they had almost all the money and all the power. And most importantly, they paid almost zero taxes. So who paid for everything? The other 97%, the third estate. That's everyone from the poorest peasant to the richest merchant. They had to carry the entire financial weight of the nation on their backs. This etching from the time just hits the nail on the head. It shows exactly how people felt. The nobleman is a fat spider, just sitting there getting rich, while the peasant is a fly caught in his web, forced to give up everything he has, his crops, his money, his hard work, only to be, completely devoured. And on top of all that social unfairness, the kingdom was completely, totally broke. Years and years of expensive wars, including, funnily enough, helping the American Revolution, plus the absolutely insane spending of the royal court at Versailles, it had all pushed the national debt to over 3 billion livres. The government was spending more just on interest payments than on literally anything else. So you've just got this perfect storm brewing. The population was booming, but a few bad harvests meant there wasn't enough food to go around. So the price of bread, the one thing most people relied on to survive, went through the roof. At the exact same time, you have these radical new ideas spreading from thinkers of the Enlightenment, ideas that said government should get its power from the people, not from God. And you've got this rising middle class of educated people who were just sick and tired of a system where your birth mattered more than your abilities. So you have hunger, you have debt, and you have these powerful new ideas about freedom all swirling around together. This thing was about to blow. It just needed one final push. And that push came when King Louis XVI, desperate for cash, called a big meeting called the Estates General to try and get new taxes approved. But here was the problem. The voting system was rigged. The old way was that each estate got one vote. That meant the clergy and the nobility could always team up and outvote the third estate 2-1. But this time, the third estate demanded a new way, one vote for each representative. That would finally give the people a real voice. The king said no. So, when the representatives for the Third Estate showed up on June 20th and found the doors to the assembly hall locked, they didn't just go home. No way. They marched over to a nearby indoor tennis court, and there they took an incredible, defiant oath. They declared themselves the National Assembly and swore they would not stop meeting until they had written a brand new constitution for France. This was the moment of no return. They were no longer just subjects of a king. They were the voice of the nation itself. So the revolution was on. It was a massive political earthquake. But that early, hopeful phase of writing a constitution, well, it was fragile. As enemies gathered outside France and divisions grew within, that hope was about to curdle into paranoia and descend into something truly terrifying. I mean, listen to this.
In August of 1789, the National Assembly produced this incredible document, the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen. It was this beacon of hope, declaring that rights like liberty and property were natural and couldn't be taken away. It said that all men are born free and equal. A beautiful idea. But the big question was, who exactly counted as all men?
Almost right away, you could see the cracks forming. The new constitution in 1791 split the country into two groups. Only so-called active citizens, men over 25 who paid a certain amount in taxes, could actually vote. That left out most men and, of course, all women. They were called passive citizens. They had no political rights at all. So much for equality, right? And this timeline shows just how fast things went off the rails. France went to war with its nervous neighbors, and as the threat grew from the outside, the revolution became more extreme on the inside. The king was caught trying to flee and was suspected of helping the enemy. Suddenly, he wasn't a partner anymore. He was a traitor. So by 1792, the monarchy was gone, replaced by a republic. And in early 1793, they publicly executed the king. That was a moment that sent shockwaves across Europe and kicked off the most infamous phase of all, the Reign of Terror. These are the actual words of Maximilien Robespierre, the leader of the group that was basically running the government, the Committee of Public Safety. And his argument was chilling. He believed that to save the revolution from all its enemies, the state had to be absolutely ruthless. And that swift, severe, and inflexible justice he talks about, it was carried out by the guillotine. Just being suspected of being an enemy of the Republic could get you a sham trial and a one-way trip to the blade. Tens of thousands of people were executed, aristocrats, priests, regular people. But the problem with a system of terror is that it's never satisfied. It always needs new enemies. The revolution started eating its own children. And eventually, Robespierre's own allies, terrified they'd be next on the list, turned on him. In July 1794, the architect of the terror met the very same fate as thousands of his victims. With Robespierre gone, the fever of the terror finally broke. The bloodiest chapter was over, but France was exhausted, broke, and totally unstable. The big question was, what was going to rise from the ashes? And how would these powerful ideas the revolution unleashed change not just France, but the entire world? Well, the fall of Robespierre didn't exactly lead to a stable democracy. The government that followed, called the Directory, was weak and corrupt. This created a massive power vacuum, an opening for someone who could promise to bring back order and glory. And into that void stepped a brilliant, ambitious, and incredibly popular young general named Napoleon Bonaparte. So was it all for nothing? Did the revolution just trade one kind of absolute ruler for another? Well, not exactly, because even through all the chaos and the terror and the war, the core ideas of 1789 had been let loose on the world, and you just couldn't put that genie back in the bottle. Liberty, equality, fraternity, these weren't just words on a banner. They became the blueprint for political change for the next 200 years. The revolution's real, lasting legacy is right here, in documents like this one. The Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen gave the whole world a new political language. The very ideas of human rights, of government by the people, of a nation of citizens, not subjects, all the things that are the bedrock of modern democracy can trace their roots right back to this chaotic, bloody, and world-changing moment in France. And that leaves us with this huge, difficult question. The French Revolution gave us our modern language of freedom, but it also showed us how the noble pursuit of those ideals can twist into tyranny and terror. It forces us to ask ourselves, where is the line? When does fighting for liberty justify violence? And is there a price for freedom that is just too high to pay?